Gas Commission has 9 commissioners. 5 of them own and operate oil and gas companies. 2 are board members for gas companies and 2 are lawyers. There are no voting members that have environmental or human health degrees. And actually, the state requires that a majority of members of this commission have oil and gas experience, but we think at least, the other 4 of the 9 ought to have some kind of environmental background. And then ADQ is extremely understaffed. It has 4 main inspectors to cover about 4,500 wells just in the Fayetteville Shale. It's not even to mention the other conventional wells and other issues across the state. And the funds for these 4 inspectors run out in 2014. So we're hoping to get with our legislator and work with the Shale Caucus and hope that they can extend some of the funds. Another issue I'm going to talk about here in a minute is that ADQ does not have the proper equipment to test air quality in the area. So it's like a cop without handcuffs. It's really hard for them to even do their job if they do not have the proper equipment to test air. And we've talked to several employees in these state agencies at ADQ and Geological Survey and the Department of Health as well, who have been pressured to keep quiet about things they're seeing. Actually, a good friend of ours who is a board member for Fulton County Citizens Advisory Group, she used to work for the health department. And she worked for the health department while we were having this big earthquake one in 2010. She was actually told by her supervisors, when she's in public representing the health department, do not use the word earthquake. And it's probably can. Use the word tremor or seismicity, something like that. Do not use the word earthquake. So, this is a clip of the Arkansas Department of Environmental Quality. She's a representative from them. And it's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm just going to let you watch this. Explains why maybe they can't do this correctly.
We are challenged by industry groups, and we are often alone. We try to be a little more stringent, and we just get shot down and say, this is going to kill jobs, this is going to how does this kill people? We assume the rules are not adopted by you.
Yeah. You can recommission.
Yeah.
That's just for 5,000.
As you can see, on top of the conflicts of interest that exist and their lack of resources, even when they do try to do the right thing, there's pushback from industry, and ADQ often, they don't have a leg to stand on, like she says. They don't get the public support they need either. They're not exactly the best at going out in the community and building that public support like we think they should. So that's one thing we try to do as an organization, is to remind them that we want to be there to support them and do their jobs correctly. So the point of all that is, are we being protected? Are agencies even capable of protecting us? And of course, this is relevant to you all in Fayetteville. There are issues in the surrounding areas of Fayetteville too. So let's look at the mission statement for the Water Division and the Air Division of ADQ. Now, as a layperson, I would assume that, the mission of ADQ is just to protect the environment, just to protect the water, just to protect the air. As you can see, they sort of both have a caveat at the end. The first one for the Water Division is to protect and enhance the water quality of the state of Arkansas in a manner consistent with the economic well-being of all our entities. Now, I'm just a little bit confused about why they need to even include that about the economic well-being of all our entities, because I would assume that if you're protecting the environment, then the economy will kind of follow along on them. And then with the Air Division, to preserve and protect the air quality for the citizens of Arkansas through implementation and enforcement of applicable regulations in a fair and equitable manner. And often we found that it's mostly fair for industry. So again, is ADQ even capable? Here's a closer picture of the Fayetteville Shale. You can see towards to the north there is Gooseberry Lake, completely surrounded. The green dots are wells that are active in production or have been completed and are producing gas right now. The red ones are ones that have been permitted, and then the yellow is kind of hard to see, but those are the ones that are being drilled right now. As you can see down there to the south in southern Faulkner County was the Mayflower rupture site. So, to illustrate a little bit more about is ADQ even capable of protecting us, I want to look at a study that they did in the Fayetteville Shale in 2011. What they did was they studied the 5-county area, even though they only chose 3 counties to study to determine what the emissions were for 2008. They did an inventory, and then also in 2011 did some monitoring around several gas wells. So they point out, straightforward, the very first introductory paragraph, they say gas production may be a large contributor to air pollution with potential harm to public health. So they established this early on. And they go on to say that potential effects of elevated VOC concentration on public health are dependent on the identity of the chemical composition of VOC emissions, which was not determined by the study. So even if you don't know what VOCs are, you can see that, to determine what the health effects are of these emissions, they actually, have to identify the specific compounds, but they're not able to do that. If you don't know what VOCs are, they are volatile organic compounds that evaporate into the air, and things like benzene and toluene can be very harmful. And often, it takes a long time for symptoms to develop, and so it's very hard to track, very hard to monitor these things. Later on, they point out that the equipment performs adequate overall, but was not sensitive enough to detect pollutants at low concentrations that usually exist at sites. And it's these low concentrations of pollutants that persist in the environment that cause long-term health effects. So it's very important for them to be able to detect those, but unfortunately their instruments are not sensitive enough to do that. And then there were several times in the study where their data came back erroneous because of instrument failure. These are 2 times that I noted it. The second time they blame it on possibly the hot weather having contributed to the problem. And there at the bottom is a picture of the instruments that they use. That one there on the right is called the area wave, and it measures on a level of parts per million. April's going to explain a little bit more about this in her presentation. I don't want to introduce that area wave right now, because we'll see that later in the Mayflower, as they're using the same instruments there. So, like I said, they did a 5-county area, and they pointed out in the study that the highest estimated emissions were from Van Buren, White, and Conway counties, which together produced over 9% of gas in the state of O'Shell in 2008. Yet, when they went back in 2011 to do the testing, White County was completely ignored, which is one of the top 3 producers, and Cleveland County was also ignored. So, obviously, they didn't do a very comprehensive study. And of course, they point out that the annual emissions are expected to have increased substantially since 2008. And then one final quote I want to mention from that study is very straightforward. Air monitoring instruments are unable to measure low levels, which are important for assessing if air quality is harmful to the public. So, they did this study and they spent about a year doing it, and they found out all these things that they really didn't find out, And this is actually a picture of my nephew. This is April's little boy. And of course, I worry about him and his future. Okay, let's get into the Mayflower oil spill. Some of you have probably seen this video. It's been posted to YouTube. The spill.
So that is a pipeline that is busted, and it's flooded the neighborhood, and it's going all the way to the drain at the end of the street. Our house is here, which is seemingly unaffected, but the smell is unbelievable. I mean, look. Incredible. And that is oil.
But there's about, according to Exxon's estimate, 5,000 barrels that were spilled that day. Although we've seen independent estimates that it's twice as big as that, 10,000 barrels. Here's some pictures that April took the day after the spill. She's inside the Northwood subdivision. People looked like they were having a birthday party that day or something. I can't imagine driving down the street and driving through that oil. So from the neighborhood, it went sort of through a different, a few different yards. These are the paper towels that they used to clean up some of it. Actually, one of the materials inside that paper towel is patented by Exxon, so they're actually profiting off of these materials that they're using to clean up. So it flowed down into the storm drain, and as you all know, it made its way through the storm drain into the cove of Lake Conway, and eventually out into the lake. Even though the state maintains it's not made into the lake, there are several independent studies that show that they're actually coming out this week, so we'll be seeing that in the news. And actually, ADQ's own water sampling shows benzene and toluene and some other really harmful chemicals that are in the lake. But all of this is really buried in thousands of pages of data that very few people are looking at. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what some of the issues are with the testing that's being done with the air and the water in Mayflower. First of all, the biggest issue is that the way they're informing the community is with raw data. So, Exxon has hired a company named CTEC to do their air monitoring and water monitoring. And then ADQ is also doing water monitoring, and EPA is doing their monitoring as well. And they're sending all that to the health department, who is looking over thousands of pages